Hello everybody and welcome to this video marking International Women's Day 2025. Now I often feel that this hobby forgets that women exist, but I can assure you apparently they do. I assure you, I don't know, I read somewhere on the internet that women exist. And this hobby is generally male dominated, and I think part of the reason for that is because a lot of the subject matter is male dominated. Well, in 2024, Airfix released a model of this aircraft here, the Hunting Percival Jet Provost, in the colours of an aircraft flown by Flight Lieutenant Julianne Gibson, who was the first full-time female pilot of the RAF. I have already released an unboxing video of this kit, so please feel free to check that out first if you would like, but for now we are going to be focusing on building it. This version of the Jet Provost T3/T4 was first tooled in 2016. It replaced a considerably older kit of the T3/T4. There is also a kit of the T5. All of these are separate tools, but this one here, the one you can currently buy, is a 2016 tool. According to Airfix, it has 45 parts, and this version includes 2 decal schemes. Recommended retail price at time of recording, which is March now, 2025, is £11.99. Construction will begin as expected with the cockpit, and you are going to see 2 Jet Provosts being constructed here. The darker plastic that you see in front of you now is the new release, the 2024 release. The other one is from, it's the 2017 starter set, but I think it's from later than that, about 2019-ish. You can tell the difference immediately because it has the older style of grey plastic. Now this dark plastic version is considerably easier to work with and in my opinion much better. You notice here the seats are glued in halves. Why? It's so fiddly. It's unnecessarily fiddly for what is supposed to be an easy kit to build. But these seats here, you glue the left side and the right side together and then you stick the cushions on them. However, in the pale grey plastic version, which is the older tooling, look at that short shot. Now, this one was from Lidl or Aldi, I can't remember, they look the same. We know that there's problems with those anyway, or has been in the past. They are a cheaper quality, but this is just frustrating that both chairs have them. And you can see it's clearly not the tooling itself, because the more modern release is absolutely fine. That is, however, thankfully, the only bit of short shot that would prove a problem with that particular build, which we will be seeing some more of shortly. But with the seat now assembled, the top bit goes on, which I suppose is the headrest and the lever for the ejection seat. And then you have this bulkhead, which essentially creates a barrier for you to have some weight in the nose and to not be able to see through any further, because it does, after all, have quite a large cockpit or large canopy to view the cockpit from. The whole assembly then goes on to one side and then you fit the other side on. Now this is important to dry fit. I did want to make sure that the angle of that bulkhead was fine, therefore it's still tacky at this point and it's just lined up rather roughly, fuselage put together and taped or clamped in place just to make sure that everything is where it should be, and I'm not going to have any fit issues later. The instructions don't tell you to do things like that, but I think it is extremely important to do so. Attacker Medium Green 42 is used for the seat cushions. In case you're wondering why I choose this particular colour, it's because I like it. It seems to be the right colour of green, but it was actually bought for a Second World War era United States Army Air Force set, so yeah, it's just me making the most of the colours I've got. But I think it does create a rather nice green colour, and if you put a wash on it as well, it just looks to me like the correct seat colour for this era. The Vallejo black is then slapped on everywhere else because the majority of this cockpit is indeed black. The same goes for the insides of the fuselage, so both port and starboard sides painted black. There's not really much detail to pick out. There's some moulded detail, as you can see, but not much, and certainly not enough to warrant picking out separate bits in separate colours and whatever. Anyway, the instrument panel is provided via a decal, which is perfectly appropriate. It's fine. I quite like it. It looks detailed enough. That goes onto a grey instrument panel piece, which I've left on the sprue to make it easier to apply the decal. The grey in question, I believe, is Hitaka's Ocean Grey, which, again, I quite like using as a dark grey for interior. It's not horrendously dark, because if it's too dark, you don't see it. and I mean you just use black if you want it really dark. So I tend to lighten things up a little bit inside, and the ocean grey, I think, is an appropriate colour. You can also see that I've painted the seat belts a beige colour. Again, I did that off camera because otherwise it's basically just me holding a paintbrush. The instructions say to put 2.5 gums inside the nose of this. I think that that's not actually correct. I think you need, or you can get away with, less weight. However, I cut these little strips of plumber's lead just about the right sort of size, held them in place with super glue. I used standard kitchen scales, and yes, don't worry, I used kitchen roll on top to make sure that the lead didn't touch the surface that the food is going to touch, so that we don't all die of lead poisoning. Don't worry about that. But I weighed 2.5 grams on those scales, and put about 2.3 in the end, because that's pretty much all that would fit. And there is no chance that this is ever going to sit on its tail. So I don't think it needs anywhere near 2.5 grams, or my scales are completely rubbish. However, if you go by the instructions, please make room for 2.5 grams of weight. Because I am a bit particular with making sure my tricycle undercarriage aircraft actually sit on their undercarriage, I'm now gluing the wings together, and I'm going to be assembling the entire tail. However, I have deliberately left space in the nose by way of not fitting the little panel that covers the undercarriage bay. I've left that open so that if it needs more weight, I have the option of adding more weight now rather than later. I often, if possible, don't even glue the fuselage halves together, and that then gives me the opportunity to add it in that way. However, because this aircraft has this tailpiece, this one tailpiece, you don't have the option of testing the weight of the tail without gluing the fuselage together. Not really. No, I've actually made one of these kits before, so I kind of knew that this was going to be absolutely fine. However, I still was overly paranoid and overly cautious, and making sure that this was sitting properly. And you can see here, I'm just testing it with a stick. The stick goes roughly where the undercarriage does, and if it leans forward, all good. And if it leans back, oh bugger. Next then, we just have the final pieces, including the intakes, which are positioned with this one piece against the fuselage, and then there's one piece over the top. I do find it a little bit fiddly, actually. I mean, it's not that bad. I'm not saying it's particularly difficult, but one side, every time I've made the Jet Provost, one side always seems to go better than the other for some reason. I don't know if it's just me, and the first one's always the bad one, and then the second one I've improved, or whether it is actually a weird kit thing, but for some reason, it's always just somewhat trickier to do the second one than the first one. No, the other way around. The first one then the second one. You know what? I don't care. We've also got this little panel that I mentioned earlier, and you can see a little bit of green filling, which is some liquid stuff that I used just on a few grooves. Everything has now been primed in bog standard generic white Halford primer, and I'm actually going to confess here, I made this back in, I think it was August or September 2024, it was around then, and the primer that I bought was a little bit old and was considerably better than the newer one that I've bought, so maybe watch Halford's primer for now, but at this time it was good. The main colour will be from this Attacker Blue Line set, which, as you can see, is for the modern RAF, and it's volume 3, which covers all of the beautiful training aircraft. And this one here, of course, is the red and white and grey scheme. Being Blue Line paints, they're designed for brush painting, so I'm using this Attacker thinner, and the first of these colours is Traffic White. Spraying white on white is very classic of me to try and feature in a video, and doesn't look very good, so I'm not going to dwell on this too much, but essentially I sprayed the white on the white to make the white a slightly different white in line with the white that I wanted it to be. This is not the first build I've done with this paint set, and I've never had a problem. These Blue Line ones can sometimes be a bit tricky through an airbrush, but if you get the consistency about right, and I think I did on this particular build, then all is good. Next, of course, is the light aircraft grey from the same set, and that was sprayed on, well, the bits that were going to be grey. Interestingly, the Jet Provost in this scheme had grey partially on the top surface of the tail, but the entirety of the bottom surface was grey. So here I'm painting just the elevators, whereas on the bottom I'm painting everything as well, and that's because the top had red on the rest. I don't know why, it's just colourful, and I quite like it. Speaking of red, Signal Red is the final colour in this tricolour scheme, and that too is just put through the airbrush and sprayed liberally on. And it is here where I'm going to, in a weird move for this channel, go back to past Captain to explain how stupid I was. Well, I suppose this is a case of do what I say and not what I do, isn't it? I completely messed up the masking on this. I've revealed the tape and the paint has bled everywhere and it's red on white. And this is the better side as well. That's worse. Yeah, a little bit of bleed onto the grey as well. So yeah, definitely not ideal. One way around this, you'll probably already know it. When you tape it, spray the colour that you've just covered up. So in this case, it's paint the white, tape, then spray white, then go over red. I was being lazy, and my airbrush does need a proper clean, so it's not spraying quite right either. And that laziness now means I've got a lot more work to do. I need to get a load of red off of a load of white. The other way that I tend to try and prevent such paint bleed, obviously make sure the consistency of the paint is correct, but also spray. So in this case, spray sort of at that angle, never actually spray up into the line. And another one is using a wooden stick, a cocktail stick, a toothpick, anything like that, to firmly push down over any of these panel lines. I didn't do any of those things, and this is what happens if you don't. So now I have extra work to do. I'm not likely to film it because it's going to be very frustrating, but I'm going to remove all of this red paint bleed and hope I haven't ruined a kit. What I'm immediately going to do, however, is put this down to one side and try again with something else because I'm a bit frustrated by it. Anyway, just wanted to check in and confess I am an idiot. Right, well, the colours were now tidied up with a paintbrush, and you can see they look a lot better. Not perfect, but certainly a lot better. The front has now been masked off with this white, very flexible tape, I think lining tape or whatever, and the Vallejo black makes a reappearance to paint the anti-glare panel on the front. I generally don't bother masking things like this. Should I? Yeah, probably. Do I? Oh, can't be bothered. It's only a small bit. And here I think it goes on absolutely fine. The entire aircraft was then gloss varnished in preparation for the decals, and it is here where we're going to see a slight compromise of sorts. So there are two schemes with this kit, and I wanted to do both of them, but of course there's only one set of stencils with the kit. So I took the very basic stencils from the starter set, the other one that I had, the pale grey earlier release, and used that on the second scheme, and then I used the main stencils on this scheme. So there's going to be some weird difference between the stencils, but here is the rather colourful walkways that go on, and that's the obvious way of telling which one has the better quality stenciling. And being cartographed decals, there's no problem whatsoever with these. In this particular build, I did not even use any setting solution like Microsol or Microset. Of course you can if you wish, and it will help adhere to the surfaces a little bit better, but most of this is quite smooth anyway. And the fact that I have gloss varnished just makes it easier to manipulate once they are there. Don't feel you have to gloss varnish to put decals on, but I personally do because I just find it easier. Finally then, we have the canopy, which has been painted separately. This has been painted with the same white because, of course, it's a brush-ready white, so all is good there. There is a slight gap. I don't think it's the problem with the kit. I think it's probably the way that I've made it, but there is a slight gap that shouldn't be there and isn't on my others. And there should also be a decal, which is the warning lines around the frame. That just disintegrated. Well, I say disintegrated, it folded, and I wasn't very good with it, and I just couldn't be bothered, so I just left it off in the end. And then the undercarriage, finally, which is the wheel on a combined leg and door, with the only parts remaining being what I assume are radio antenna or some sort of sensory antenna. I was going to say sensory antenna, but obviously that's not right. That go on the top of the fuselage. They were left to last because, well, they're the sorts of things that get knocked out by careless captains, don't they? So they finally go on and were painted a cream colour once glued. So there we go, first Jet Provost done, and I'm obviously not going to now spend the exact same amount of time talking about the second Jet Provost, but I was making them side by side, so pretty much everything that I did with this one, I did with the other one. Of course, however, the variation is in the paint scheme, so I'm just going to talk about how I did the paint for the second of the two Jet Provosts. Using the same white primer, the luminous orange was now put in place on the orange and silver Provost. Now I'm doing the orange first because I then covered it up and sprayed everything over the top with a rattle can silver. This colour is horrendously thin, and I don't think I put any thinner in at all to get it through the airbrush. And by putting it on first, I can then do the tactic that I didn't do with the first Jet Provost. So I'm spraying the luminous orange or Dayglow orange wherever it needs to go, and then masking it off and then going over it with a couple of coats again, just to make sure that the silver doesn't run onto the orange, because silver on orange is going to be an absolute pig to get off, and obviously I don't want to have to worry about that. But that's really the only difference, and this scheme is much easier, and the fact that I went for a rattle can again made it just super simple to do. The only other compromise, of course, as I mentioned, were the decals, which can easily be identified by the simpler walkways on either side of the fuselage, and they're not quite thick enough. You can see that the Dayglow orange goes through half of the roundel. A little bit disappointing. I can't say I'm surprised, but never mind. And the band around the fuselage was an absolute flipping son of a... It was annoying. I don't think it was the right shape, and it even tells you to cut some. So how lazy is that? No, make it the right shape, Airfix. Don't tell me to go cutting around decals. God. Anyway, finally, we have 2 completed Jet Provosts. This is the sort of kit that I could recommend to anyone. If you haven't made one yet, just make one. Check out and buy one and make one. If you see one in Aldi or Lidl, or you see one cheap in a sale somewhere, I've seen one at in a local model shop that was discounted, just pick one up. The paints are likely to be questionable, but the actual main release like this for $11.99, yeah, I think it's a really enjoyable build. The main scheme, the red, white and grey, obviously it's a great thing to highlight. The fact that Airfix are selling this on the grounds of it's a particular aircraft for a particular person of note, as in a noteworthy event in RAF history, is obviously really good. More of that, please, Airfix. But also the colour scheme itself is genuinely one of my favourites. I'm getting a bit of a collection now of the tricolour trainer scheme of this era, and I'm not going to stop. I've still got a 148th Chipmunk that will end up being this colour. Anyway, yeah, there's going to be plenty. As you can see from the silver aircraft, it does come with an option for having the canopy open, and as long as you're okay with painting the incredibly tiny fiddly yellow and black stripes on the ejection seat handles, then fingers crossed, you can do a good job of it. It's very, very small and very, very fiddly, but I think it looks okay. And the only other real thing to note is that the Dayglow orange has to be painted, whereas a kit, for example the Vampire in the Airfix range, will supply it with decals. So interesting that they've decided to do this one painted but the other one decals. But then again, given the blue stripe that they hadn't measured up properly, maybe it's for the best, because maybe the Dayglow ones wouldn't have fit in. I don't know, it's all subjective. Ultimately, if you don't like doing Dayglow orange, then don't just do the red, white and grey scheme. Anyway, I suppose... unfortunately, a ramble appears to have broken out, and I appear to now just be talking absolute nonsense. So just thank you for watching. Let me know what you think. Is this an aircraft you're interested in? They're in museums all over the country. Here in the UK, you can't go too far without bumping into a Hunting Percival Jet Provost. Have you made the old kit? Because spoilers, I have the T5 in my collection, an old vintage Airfix kit. I will be making it fairly soon. Is that something you're interested in? Have you made it? Maybe you've done a comparison of this one and the antique one from, was it late 50s or whatever? I guess what I'm trying to say is there's so much Jet Provost, not enough time. Anyway, like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already, notification bell if you want to be notified of when a new video comes out. I do have a backlog of videos that I'm working through at the moment, this being one of them. As I said, I actually built these, I think it was started in August, ended in September, something like that. And watching the footage back, I had to refresh my memory. I should really make notes about the builds just to help with things like this, but I genuinely didn't intend to leave them this long. It's just sometimes there's things get in the way. I'm trying to make excuses. I don't even need to make excuses, but I feel that I need to. So there are a few more videos coming up fairly soon, which are also old kits. If you know what they are, then it's likely you're a channel member and one of the people on screen. Yes, I often share spoilers, what I've got on the bench and what's going on and what's been finished, and channel members often get these first, so they will probably know what is coming up long before even I do, because that's just the way my memory works. Anyway, if you want to join them, please do, but don't feel you need to. Just supporting the channel by watching my content is good enough, and maybe share it with a friend or an enemy. If you don't like it, share it with an enemy. Print it out. Print out an entire, like, shot for shot of my video and hand it out over to someone you don't like in book form. There, that's a power play. I have no idea what I'm saying anymore. Bye.